Thank you. I hope that my presentation will also come up soon on the screen, but before that I want to show the gratitude to the organizers for inviting us here in such a difficult times for Georgia. You probably know that our people are right now fighting for getting back our falsified elections and for the basic human rights, which probably a few years ago was kind of not really forecasted and not seen that this could happen to our country. But this is a good example, if it can be called good, that these things can happen anywhere and you are never protected, how this disinformation is affecting your personal life, your personal identity, your family, your children, and so on. And I'm really happy that this panel discussion brought a very important topic of the gender dimension, because gender is not something that should be spoken or protected by women, because we are speaking about at least, if we're speaking about women, we're speaking about at least half of the population, and if we're speaking about gender in general, then I think we're speaking about the whole population of the world, which should be taking care of fighting back the democracy and not letting anybody to shrink the spaces for people with different identities. I represent IREX, Georgia. I'm leading program Transform in my country, and we are tackling very important question of tech-facilitated gender-based violence. We call it TFGBV. I know when you hear this abbreviation, you are probably a bit scared because it's long and not very clear and not very popular because it's very new. Last year when we started working on the TFGBV, everybody was pretty surprised of what we are meaning by that. But this year it's on the table. Everybody is talking about it worldwide because online violence, online gender-based violence, GID, is now really affecting everybody. Our program is a 3-year pilot program. We are working in Georgia, Kenya, and Guatemala. You are probably surprised by this, how we pick these countries, but it's a pilot program, which means that it's one of the first programs that's working on the tech-facilitated gender-based violence. So we picked one country per continent to see how this is affecting people's lives. We do a lot of research, and I absolutely agree with Kate that it's very important to research this and to see what's happening because it's very new. It's also not very easy to research, but it's also very difficult to see what's the impact. But still, like if you are observing it in very different parts of the world, you can also see how much differences there are, but mostly how similar the personal sometimes tragedies and personal stories can be, no matter if the woman is living in Georgia, in South Africa, in US, or in UK. I mean, the situation is unfortunately similar and prevalence is very high. In Europe, it's 72%, and it's the best number. We try to tackle TFGBVs through few main directions. One is capacity building, because if you want to tackle this, you need to inform people what it is and how dangerous it is, because online violence is not often taken serious. If somebody is not hitting you, you are not considered as a survivor of the gender-based violence. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges. So speaking about it, and even survivors, they don't take it serious. If somebody threatened to rape me online, they are online, I don't know them, so why is this violence? I think this is usually also the perspective of also survivors, and they don't understand how much trauma it leaves in your life. Second big direction that we have besides capacity building, and I'm happy that our capacity building modules will be coming public very soon, so I can be able to share it with all of you, probably through the organizers. We are funding local organizations, all 3 countries who are doing their interventions, be it research, be it campaign, but especially developing the tech solutions. You can't force civil society organizations to take responsibility for something that is perpetrated by the tech sector, because it's creating engagement, it's creating money. It was mentioned like how influencers are getting money while they're promoting, for example, Kremlin propaganda, because it's creating engagement and it's creating hate, and then it creates money. So sometimes Kremlin even doesn't have to pay them, because that's what's sold on the social media. People like to read harassing content, unfortunately. And we do a lot of research, and we also do a lot of support to the survivor-sharing organizations, because one of the problems is that survivor-sharing organizations are taking the whole responsibility to take care of the survivors, to take care of themselves, and sometimes they're not even empowered with the tools, because as Kate mentioned, like, it's changing so fast, and it's technology. Not all of us are very good in technology, right? There might be things that we don't know. There might be hacking techniques that we cannot react to. So it's also very difficult to only put this responsibility on survivor-sharing organizations, but we're still trying to build the capacity so they can protect themselves as much as possible, as well as survivors, and keep the trauma-informed approaches, which I think is the most important and least advocated, because when you're working with the survivors, it's also very important not only to fight for the truth, but also to protect them. And this is something that should not be unseen or somehow ignored. So what is TFGBV, Tech-Facilitated Gender-Based Violence? And I want to mention here that sometimes it's easier to use online gender-based violence, but tech-facilitated gender-based violence can be happening offline, using technologies that can tackle you even without using the internet. And that's why it's also very important to keep this name and keep this definition. So it's basically all kinds of violence that is also happening offline, but gone online, or perpetrators using different technologies. For example, in spring, when people were standing on the streets in Georgia protesting the foreign agent law, they were called by hundreds of people. They were receiving threatening calls. That's also tech-facilitated gender-based violence. If you are called by a person, and then the harassment is sexualized, or it's using different narratives, or they are calling your husband, for example, and threatening him that if you don't shut up, you will get some problems. So it includes cyber-stalking, doxing, trolling, cyberbullying, hate speech, public shaming, gender and identity disinformation, of course, and threatening. And what's very important is, by global studies, we can see that at least 83% of women have been affected or have seen TFGBV, and it's 3 times more of a number compared to the male people who have received violent comments or been affected by the violence online. Some of the main findings that I can share by our work, as I said, it's a pilot program, so we're experimenting a lot, and it's really good opportunity for us to learn a lot and then share our learnings. GID is the most recognizable type of TFGBV for women in politics and public life. We are especially working with the women in politics and public life because it's also shown that they are mostly affected. So, and by public life, I think we can mean any woman who wants to openly speak up her mind and share her opinion. There are lots of policy gaps, and there are lots of legislative gaps. So we have, for example, law on the data protection, we have the law on the gender violence, but there is no way to connect them. So it's usually, when it comes to the online gender-based violence, it's almost impossible to somehow find a name for it and to punish the perpetrators. Intersectionality, I think it was very well mentioned also by Christina, that more vulnerable you are in general, more due to your identity, be it being a refugee, living in a conflict, being a religious or ethnic minority. We have a third of population which is religious or ethnic minority. You are in more danger, and you are in double danger, because if perpetrators are also harassing you, and then your cultural norms are also not giving you possibility to openly speak about it at your home. Not everybody can tell their family members they are threatened online, because then they are also threatened from their family members. So it's a danger that can duplicate if you speak up about it. That's why most of the cases are going silent, and in Georgia we don't have number of cases. One thing is the legislation gap, but another thing is that people are scared to report. People are scared to be laughed about if they say they were harassed online, and that's why they are going to the court. There is a lack of the solidarity networks, because when people are polarized, and it was mentioned many times, sometimes we might not be really like divided, but we But all the disinformation is forcing you to feel like your society is divided and we are not agreeing each other. So sometimes even people who are on the same side of the story, they are also harassing each other online, and because they are tense, they are stressed, and they are protecting themselves. And there is a lack of rapid response. This spring, we have launched the rapid response funding for the activists to give them psychosocial and cybersecurity support, and we got the feedback that it was almost the only opportunity where they could receive this help so rapidly. Because if you are a survivor, if you need psychosocial support, and then the foundation tells you that it will be like a 1 month process, you don't need that, right? You need to be heard right away when something is happening. So it's very important to create such services. We have actually implemented 2 case studies. We can't publish them, unfortunately, because both case studies showed that main perpetrator in Georgia is our government. It's a Georgian dream. So if you publish this, you are even putting under danger the researchers who worked on that, because you are openly saying that, yeah, the online violence is mainly caused by the rulers of the country. And of course, we can see the Kremlin influence and narratives. Gender disinformation in Georgia is fueled by them, it's paid by them. It was mentioned, I think, yesterday or today, that sometimes they're targeting social narratives in the country, sometimes not. In Georgia, they definitely know people very well. They know what people get angry about, what will play on their nerves, so they know very well those social norms, and they are using them very well for targeting, especially women in politics and public life. Georgian Dream Party and their proxies, which are initiating different laws, but are also openly harassing women online and offline. Our president, who is a woman, has been harassed a lot, not because of her political ideas, but because she is a woman. And a lot of AI falsified data has been spread also in the past weeks, which are sexualizing her and putting her in, creating this image that being president or being leading country is not a woman's work. And of course, this also creates this feeling that if you are also in leading position, you might be affected by the perpetrators. So you feel fear, and that's very natural. It's okay to be afraid to be influenced by the perpetrators. And there are different tactics, of course. So if 2 years ago the perpetrators were going more like unknown, using different names, now they're openly saying that, yeah, it's us, we are doing all this disinformation work, and it's usually, again, the Georgian dream. We canceled gender quotas, we changed the legislation, we now have anti-LGBT law, which is against the LGBT propaganda, as they say it, but it's actually against freedom of speech. Because even if you're mentioning gender identity in Georgia now, you might be captured because it's against the law. And you all know about the Russian foreign agent law, which basically put under risk the existence of the civil society. And of course, you're having a chilling effect. This is something that happens when you see violence going online, or you are affected by this violence. And half of the women politicians and 30% of journalists are saying that they are either quitting or they are becoming less loud, they're canceling their online accounts, so they are not talking anymore. So of course what it means is that you are basically shutting down the voice of half of the population by not paying attention to the TFGBV. And I also want to tackle another case study which we did, which was about like safe spaces. We do have some safe spaces. There are some positive developments. Our grantees now have also developed some solutions. We have SIIF application where we also added TFGBV forum. So if you're affected, you can write there and you get the advice from the lawyer or cybersecurity expert. But another problem that we found out through this studies, again, going back to where I started with, if you are creating safe space, you need to have capacity. You need to know how you can be attacked, how your group can be attacked, how the disinformation can be born in your group, how trolls and bots can also be there. So it's also very important to build the capacity of the moderators who are working on these groups, including the groups. Now we have like at least 10 groups, I guess, for organizing demonstrations and so on. And when you're writing there, you're feeling like I'm so safe, I'm writing my opinion, sometimes even some crazy ideas. And it's not safe, because if the moderators are not aware of how to keep the content safe, how you can have safe spaces safe, it will be impossible, and it can be even more dangerous because then you are openly speaking about some plans you have and they might go anywhere. I have seen my Facebook chats in some state agency high-level managers' inboxes because they were shared by some of the people I knew, and this is something that happens very usually, that information is leaking from very close circle. So being careful is very important. I've heard today also a comment that we're talking a lot about problems and we need to speak about the solutions. So some things that we found out that could be strategies is like, one of the things is like, when we are creating safe spaces, we need to take responsibility and really keep them safe, educate ourselves or educate others as much as we can, because online spaces cannot be 100% safe, but we can do as much as we can. It's very important to keep a multi-sectoral approach. We need to speak to the tech companies because, again, their products become the platforms for the perpetrators. You can't put the responsibility of safe spaces on the CSOs. You can't put this responsibility on the people who are fighting. You need to put this responsibility on the tech sector and tech regulators. All the countries where you have more or less good TFGBV legislation, which is like Australia or South Korea, for example, you have a regulator who initiated this. In Georgia, our regulator is unfortunately punishing free media, so right now this is not an option, but in the best scenario, this is the way of tackling TFGBV. Talk to different sectors, and you don't tell NGOs to do more work to tackle TFGBV. Supporting survivor serving organizations, keeping them educated, giving them now we have launched the rapid response to protect their data, and our cybersecurity team analyzed almost 20 organizations who are working with the survivors. And they don't even have data on one device. They are sometimes having data on their personal devices. And this is the data of survivors. So this is the data of people, of leakage, which might really affect the survivors. This is the data of the LGBTQI plus groups. So it's really very sensitive, and sometimes people are keeping them on their personal devices. So we need to also raise the capacity of survivor serving organizations so they are more prepared to what might come. Talk to women in politics and public life. This is the comment I've heard from one of the woman parliament member in Georgia, that she said that everybody thinks that because I'm always fighting and I'm always on TV, I'm a strong person, and I am a strong person, but I also need help, and we are really struggling and we need psychosocial support, and sometimes we need just people to tell us, you can just rest, you can just take care of yourself, or we will take care of you. And of course, keeping trauma-informed approaches for us is very important, and this is something that we also want to teach or share with the tech sector. Thank you very much. This is the QR code. You can scan and go to our program page, not to only learn about program, but also download all the materials we created. Everything else we will create will also be published there, so I hope that we can keep you updated with what we're doing. Thank you.